Let's do it.
Pokemon was everywhere in the late 90s, from the games to the anime, the TCG, along with mountains of merchandise and more. As a young kid at the time, I was right into it. I had like a Pokemon head, Pokemon t-shirt, I even had a Charmander pillow. I was the definition of a Pokemaniac, and still kind of am, to be honest. Look, I even have this squishy Pikachu.
Call the police.
For me, it was such a joy having people everywhere talking about a video game that I loved. Simply put, I had never before experienced anything like that. Yeah, I did have a small group of friends that would play Zelda and Mario, but never to this scale. Let's just say Pokemon has had a huge influence on my life, and it all started with Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue. New Zealanders could pick up a copy of Pokemon Red and Blue for the Game Boy in late 1998. This release date was also around the time the Game Boy Color came out, and I was fortunate enough to get to experience it on that system. This was the one I had. Well, I guess I still have it, and it still works. It would play the exact same as on the original Game Boy, except it would apply either a red or blue color filter to the image, depending on the version you are playing. In Japan, they were released 2 years earlier under the names Pocket Monsters Red and Green, which were then followed by an enhanced version Pocket Monsters Blue. I will be talking about these versions a little bit, but I will mostly be focusing on the international release, at least for this video.
Welcome to Kanto.
The Kanto region is the setting of the first generation of games, and is based on the real Kanto region in Japan. Since Kanto's name was never mentioned in the Generation 1 games outside of Japan prior to release of Pokemon Gold and Silver, many people made the assumption that the region was called Indigo, after the name of the Indigo Plateau. Except for Pallet Town, all of the cities and towns are named after colours, which is an interesting choice given that the Game Boy Color was not even available in the initial release of Red and Green, meaning that the games only played in grayscale. But I guess it was more to go with the game's motif of being named after colours. That actually makes a lot more sense. I just thought about it for a second. It makes more sense that way. Kanto has a history of using science and technology to create new Pokemon, such as Porygon, and making the clone Pokemon Mewtwo. The events surrounding the latter do come across as rather dark for a Pokemon game, along with other aspects like actually addressing death in the universe and hints of there being a war. This gives Kanto a bit more of an edge than many of the other regions in the series. It also makes some references to real-world locations, however I believe this is only in the English editions. I'm guessing the translators assumed that the Pokemon universe was set in an alternate version of Earth or something, given that Kanto is based on a real place. But this is simply my speculation. I have no evidence to back this up.
Picking a life partner.
When you initially start the game, Professor Oak will give you a brief introduction to the Pokemon universe. It's short and simplistic, but learning as you go is a big part of this game's appeal. For all of the Generation 1 Pokemon games, you could not yet pick to play as a girl. Having played this as a young girl, I did not care, at all, and I still don't care. Red, the canon name of the character you play as, is the definition of a blank slate. When combined with the abstract nature of the artistic style, I had no problem as a kid visualizing myself as this trainer. I mean, they did such a good job of making Red a blank slate that they have made it his actual personality. Every time you see Red cameo in other Pokemon entries, he never says anything. Despite the fact that Red is his canon name, you are free to give him any moniker you like. We also get to pick the name of our rival, against whom we shall be competing for the duration of the game. We live in a small settlement called Pallet Town, which is also the home of the famous Professor Oak. A young child should not venture out on their own, as there are wild Pokemon in all regions. To begin, we must visit Professor Oak's laboratory to select our first Pokemon. We have a choice between the Fire-type Charmander, the the water-type Squirtle, and the grass-type Bulbasaur. It's no secret that Charmander, hence its final evolution, Charizard, is a fan favourite pretty much throughout the entire series. However, when it comes to this choice, Charmander is arguably the weakest of the three.
Why you pouring me? I'm right.
Charmander is a fire type that is one of the more uncommon types, which works in its favour. On the other hand, it's weak against the first and second gym leaders and neutral against the third. Charizard receives no benefit from her dual typing, given that she does not learn any flying type moves in terms of Pokemon Red and Blue. Squirtle is effective against the first, neutral against the second, and weak against the third. Bulbasaur alone will carry you through the game for a longer period of time, and by the time you reach a gym leader who can stand up to him, you will most likely already have a strong team built. Unless you're like me as a kid and solely relied on my starter and neglected every other Pokemon in my party. Critical thinking and strategy? Pfft, who needs that? Despite all these factors, I chose Charmander because that's the one I wanted. And this is one of the series' strongest points, the ability to construct your team any way you like, for the most part, since the game does have some quirks that impede this element slightly. We have a fierce rival in Red and Blue in the form of the iconic Blue, also known as Green in the manga or Gary in the anime. His relationship with the main character, aka us, is straightforward. He wants to beat us. They've been rivals since they were kids, and now they're competing to be the best Pokemon trainer in the world. He is the grandson of Professor Oak, and this association can't help but make you feel like you're at a bit of a disadvantage. Professor Oak kind of acts like he doesn't like his grandson, like he's kind of like a dick to him in a few circumstances. I don't know why they went with it. It's kind of funny, but like, if I was like Blue's mother and I heard that like my dad was like treating my kid like shit, I would be not happy. Out of all the Pokemon games released to date, I'll consider Blue to be the strongest rival in the series, not just in terms of the challenge that he poses, but also in the way he is characterized and incorporated into the narrative. We may now venture forth into the world with our new partner. So in Pokemon Red and Blue, what exactly is our main objective? Well, there are two major goals for us to achieve. The first is the driving force that propels us around the world, and it is the pursuit of the gym badges, defeating the Elite Four, and becoming the Pokemon champion. The second goal is to complete the Pokédex. The Pokédex is a device given to us by Professor Oak, designed to catalogue and provide information regarding the various species of Pokemon. The latter is an optional goal, but whether or not you choose to complete it, you will be travelling all over Kanto, exploring various towns, cities, forests, and caves.
Who's that Pokemon?
Now we can't talk about a Pokemon game without talking about the Pokemon themselves. And by talking about the Pokemon, I mean talking about the sprites, because there are some real gems on offer.
Who's that Pokemon?
Yuck, what the fuck?
Red and Blue were developed for the original Game Boy, so they were very limited in what they could portray graphically. There are 150 or more to see, and with that in mind, there are clearly some sprites that come out looking way better than others.
You hungry? That's a silly question, isn't it? Look at you.
And these are the improved versions. Pokemon Red and Green were the first to be released in Japan in early 1996. Pokemon Blue would be released later that year to commemorate the 1 millionth sale of Pokemon Red and Green. The Japanese Blue version received various changes, including bug fixes, updated sounds, and most notably, completely new Pokemon sprites, with some of the improvements being highly debatable because some of them look worse in my opinion, and also wrong. Like Execute having one giant egg for some reason, Coughing's symbol is in the wrong place, and Kingler has two large claws rather than just the one, although I do think this pose looks a lot cooler. Machoke's expression is very off-putting. I'm not sure if he's supposed to be winking or he's having a stroke. And Snorlax now looks like he's letting a massive one rip.
Oh, even Stink would say that stinks.
Anyway, the international version we got is actually a port of the blue version rather than the original Red and Green. So I would say overall the sprites are better, but even with that said, there is still a lack of a cohesive style when it comes to the Pokemon sprites. Unlike a lot of design work, the first step wasn't create concept art as an illustration, but instead designers went straight to drawing their characters as the blocky pixel art, without giving much thought to whether or not they adhere to the same artistic style. We didn't get to see all of these individual designs come together in a consistent way until Ken Sugimori made the official artwork. Of course these Pokemon are the OG and the most iconic, but the way we remember these Pokemon comes more from the artwork of the Pokemon rather than the actual sprites from the game. But so far I've only talked about the front facing sprites. There are also the back facing sprites, which is mostly how you will see your own Pokemon. And oh boy, some of these are just like, what the fuck am I even looking at? Some back sprites I legitimately find incomprehensible. Is this really a chameleon? But why is his horn like that? That's not what his horn looks like. The overworld and menus use a few generic sprites to represent a Pokemon. You can only know for sure what the Pokemon is supposed to be by its name. It kinda takes away a bit of seeing Pokemon out in the overworld, but the game is held together with bubblegum and paper clips, and adding anything more probably would have caused it to completely collapse in on itself. The presentation while just walking around the various routes and towns is very simple but at the same time quite abstract. Given the small size of the Game Boy screen, everything had to be shrunk down to convey a world. For the most part, I think the game does a really good job of making everything readable, while keeping each area distinct from one another. The areas that are the worst to navigate through are definitely the caves. They are very samey looking environments, making it easy to get lost. Also, they have way too many encounters.
It feels like somebody
Wants to sell me something?
I told you he was on to us.
Some building interiors suffer a bit from the sameness, but nowhere near as bad. The incredible variety between cheery tracks and somber ones is one of the many highlights of the soundtrack for Pokemon Red and Blue. The introductory music is instantly recognizable and effective at creating the mood for the journey ahead. Another memorable tune is the battle theme, which has been sampled and reworked for subsequent games. Then there is the theme to Lavender Town, which is one of the most well-known themes in the series. Not only is Lavender Town's layout based on a graveyard, but the buildings are haunted by the ghosts of long-dead Pokemon, adding to the eerie atmosphere. The Lavender Town syndrome myth that has sprung up around the music claims that many Japanese children forever slept themselves because of the high-pitched note that only a select few can hear. And this information comes from the internet, so you know it's true. You can't lie on the internet.
Honey, you've got a big storm coming.
Many of the locations you visit will have trainers. The overworld sprites for them are quite simplistic and have far less diversity than those found in battles.
Every day we stray further from God.
The overweight balding dude was always the most memorable for me, especially when he has been used to represent trainers who don't look anything like him.
My Pokemon is fighting.
When participating in any type of battle, you will be taken to a separate area than that of the overworld. Pokemon is a pretty standard turn-based RPG, which is easy to forget at times, as Pokemon has almost become a genre all of its own. Based on a Pokemon speed stat, the game determines who goes first. The fastest Pokemon moves first, obviously. In addition to attacking, you can utilize items to replenish health and heal status ailments, among other things. If you're facing a wild Pokemon, you can flee the battle or even try to catch the Pokemon if you desire. At any given time, you can have a maximum of 6 Pokemon on your team. When all of the opposing Pokemon faint, the battle is over. When you battle another trainer, you'll be rewarded with money, and for each enemy Pokemon you defeat, the Pokemon that defeated it will gain experience points. You can also just swap out Pokemon and have a stronger Pokemon take out that Pokemon and get experience that way. If you have like a Kakuna or like something that can't really do anything. On the surface, it appears to be a straightforward gameplay mechanic, but what makes it a lot more interesting is understanding all of the different Pokemon types and moves that may be used to create teams of Pokemon. Experimentation is the name of the game. What I loved as a kid, and still to this day, is the ability to make a team all of your own. Battle animations are simple but very smartly incorporated. While yes, it would be awesome to have the Pokemon moving around in battle like in the anime, that would be extremely impractical, especially on the Game Boy. Instead of Pokemon having their own unique animations when performing moves have their own animations associated with them and are just overlaid with the Pokemon using them, making for very effective use of space on the small cartridge, while still allowing all of the 150 or more Pokemon seem alive. The AI in these games is fairly rudimentary, so you often find the opposing Pokemon take questionable actions. Wild Pokemon seem to attack randomly, and for trainers they have a variety of different behaviours. Most trainers you face will just try to damage your Pokemon as much as possible, without much consideration for typing and any kind of strategy really. They are disincentivized to use non-damaging moves, so these trainers will almost never use moves that affect your Pokemon's stats. There are also trainers which I guess you would consider having good AI. This good AI will prioritize using super effective moves, even if they don't deal any damage. So you could have a Pokemon spamming agility against you infinitely. And I say infinitely because unlike the player, the AI doesn't have PP, so they can use any moves they like as many times as they like. This also includes wild Pokemon too. In fact, the AI in this game does a lot of things that the player can't do. When you switch out your active Pokemon or use an item in battle, that action will always go first, being given priority over the opponent taking any action. However, when the AI takes one of these actions, it does not gain any priority and will take place as if the opposing Pokemon were to use an attack. This means that you can see the AI perform actions that are impossible for the player to perform. For example, if the AI chooses to use a Hyper Potion, but its active Pokemon is slower than yours, then your Pokemon will attack first before the AI uses the Hyper Potion. They will even retroactively select moves after you have switched out to a different Pokemon. For example, you have a Fire type out against their Water type, so you switch out to a Grass type. The AI will not use a Water type attack because you just switched to a Pokemon resistant to water moves. They're a bunch of cheaters, and yet they still suck. Each Pokemon has its own typing, which determines their strengths and weaknesses, as well as what moves they will be able to learn. A Pokemon can be considered more than one type. For example, Charizard is both fire and flying. In Gen 1, there are a total of 15 different types, but not all types are considered equal, as some are clearly better than others. Due to some quirks of this game, the balancing is kind of non-existent. Psychic type is by far the best typing, only being weak to Bug, but there are only 2 Bug type moves that actually deal damage and they both suck. Psychic was also supposed to be weak to Ghost type, but because of some iffy programming, it is immune instead. But even if this weren't the case, the only Ghost types in the game are the Ghastly line, which are also poison types. And can you guess what poison is weak to? That's right, ground. But also psychic. Dragon type is also pretty decent, as it's only weak to itself and ice. However, it is very rare and you will only really encounter this typing during the endgame. Some types are far more prevalent than others, with the most common being normal and water types. So while having a broad team is beneficial, you don't have to worry about finding coverage for every type. The weaknesses and strengths are pretty easy to figure out for yourself. Like, it makes sense that water would be strong against fire, but weak against grass. But then there are less obvious ones like flying being weak to ice. Is it because it freezes their wings and they fall out of the sky or something? I don't really get it, but maybe that's just because I'm dumb. Like the Pokemon themselves, the moves that they use also have a typing attributed to them. And if you use a move that is the same as your Pokemon's type, you'll get a stab bonus to your attack. Stab stands for same type attack bonus. Say that Lapras uses Hydro Pump, instead of having a power of 110, it will be 1.5 times stronger, making it a power of 165. You'll usually want to use an attack that is super effective against your opponent to inflict the maximum amount of damage.
Turn attack.
As a general rule, the more powerful an attack, the less PP it will have and less accurate it will be. PP stands for poutine potatoes. PP stands for power points, by the way, and it is just the number of times your Pokemon can perform a move. There is a caveat to the accuracy of moves though, and that is what is known as a Gen 1 miss, due to some iffy programming. Even a 100% accurate move has a 1 in 256 chance of missing. Yay. Now I'm going to do a little side segment going over the worst move in the game. This segment is going to be called Dear Rap, I Hate You. If Rap hits, it will immobilize your Pokemon. Your only option is to switch out and hope that your opponent doesn't use Rap again. Every time I faced a Bellsprout, I would just pray that it wouldn't use it. As well as just damaging an opposing Pokemon, you can also inflict status effects on them, such as paralyzing them, which lowers a Pokemon's speed and also has a chance of stopping them from attacking during their turn. Sleep is a pretty bad affliction as you have no chance of attacking while asleep, and in Gen 1 the turn that your Pokemon wakes up, they still won't be able to attack.
Wake up! You gotta wake up, please!
By far the worst status effect in the game is getting frozen. If a Pokemon is frozen, it cannot be thawed without an item, being hit by haze or being hit with a move that can burn. So if you don't have an item to deal with it, then it is completely on your opponent to thaw you. Yes, the AI may be a bit dumb, but considering that ice type moves are the only ones that can freeze you, the chances of your opponent actually knowing a fire type move is extremely low. It's pretty much just a pseudo KO. There are a few more status effects that can be inflicted. If a Pokemon has the same type as a move used on it, any major status effects from the move's secondary effects are neutralized. As a result, electric types cannot be paralyzed by Thunderbolt, and ice types cannot be frozen by Ice Beam, and normal types cannot be paralyzed by Body Slam. To add on to this, poison types can never be poisoned. There are moves that can either raise your own Pokemon stats or lower your opponent's. If you're anything like me as a kid, then you probably thought, do no damage, do not use. But this is actually a really dumb way of thinking about it, as raising up your Pokemon's stats can really turn the tide of a battle. If you can find a good Pokemon to set up on, you can easily sweep through a trainer's entire team, even if it's considered a bad matchup where you're under-leveled. This strategy is aided a lot by a glitch in the game's programming, and this glitch has come to be known as the badge boost glitch. When you earn certain gym badges, they will boost a certain stat by 12.5%. But because of some iffy programming, it ends up doing more than just this. When one of your stats is changed during a battle, the game recalculates it using the unboosted number and then applies all of your badge bonuses. That means the other stats get a duplicate of their badge boost. For example, if you have the Boulder badge and you get hit by a string shot, lowering your speed, then the game sets your speed to 2/3 of your original speed, then applies all badge boosts, increasing your attack. So once you have earned a few badges, stat changing moves become incredibly powerful. When you level up or the battle concludes, the accumulated badge benefits disappear. Sometimes when you attack a Pokemon, you'll get a critical hit, making the attack cause more damage. Most of the time. I say most of the time because critical hits will ignore any stat changes from either Pokemon during damage calculation. So if you have boosted your Pokemon's stats, you may actually end up doing less damage. Critical hit chance is based on a Pokemon's speed, so the faster the Pokemon, the more likely they are at getting a critical hit, giving fast Pokemon even more advantage over the slower ones. A Pokemon's stats have a big effect on how well a move will perform. Each Pokemon has 5 different stats: HP, Attack, Defense, Speed, and Special. All of these stats are pretty self-explanatory. If the Pokemon uses a move like Slash, it takes into account the attack stat. When being hit by the move Slash, it uses the defense stat. Now if you're familiar with more modern Pokemon games, you will notice that there is one less stat than you would expect. That's because in Generation 1, the special stat encompassed both special attack and special defense, making a very frail Pokemon like Alakazam have great resistances to any special attacks used against it. So it is important to keep your Pokemon's stats in mind when teaching them moves. Overall, the battle system is a lot of fun. Buggy? Yes. Unbalanced? Yes. Exploitable? Yes. But still a lot of fun. But moves don't only have their uses during a fight. There are also those that can be used outside of battle. These come in the form of HMs, which stands for Hidden Machines. These HM moves are mostly used to gate progression, as they can only be used outside of battle if you have the right gym badge. Objects that can be interactive using HM moves are really obvious. It kind of reminds me of an older cartoons, where the cell of the object that the character is going to interact with is less detailed. Yeah, it's kind of like that. I don't know, that analogy isn't that great, but I think you get what I mean. Once a Pokemon has learned an HM, it will be permanent, so you'll need to make sure you teach it to the right Pokemon, or you might end up wasting one of your Pokemon's move slots, which there is only ever a max of 4 per Pokemon. You don't want to be teaching Cut to your Charizard because it is utter crap in battle. This is probably how a lot of us ended up having an HM slave in our party. A Pokemon solely there to teach HMs to. But there are some good HMs such as Surf, which is a fantastic water move that also lets you travel across bodies of water, and Fly, which takes 2 turns to perform, but because your Pokemon soars up high in the air, they can avoid powerful attacks such as Hyper Beam and Self-Destruct. Fly is the game's fast travel system. When you have a Pokemon in your party that can fly, then you can travel to already visited locations. Even if it is just a little Pidgey, it can somehow fly you there.
Okay, Pidgey, use Fly.
Truth be told, the HM system is actually something that I kind of don't like at all. Because you need Pokemon that know the HM moves to get around, this places restrictions on how you can build your team. As HM moves in this game are activated via the menu, you'll need to access it often. Ultimately, they are used as a roadblock to progression, but instead of the roadblock going away after you meet the requirements, it just follows you around. There are also technical machines, abbreviated as TMs. They, like HMs, teach Pokemon specific moves. However, TMs can only be used once. Some TMs can be obtained from a store multiple times, while others can only be obtained once per playthrough, which is a real bummer when it comes to experimenting with moves and team building. Of course, this being a turn-based RPG, there is a leveling system. Your Pokemon earn experience by battling other Pokemon. Once they have reached a certain threshold, they will level up, improving their stats. Not all Pokemon level up at the same rate. Some gain levels much faster than others, such as Jigglypuff and Chansey. Reaching certain levels will also give a Pokemon a chance to learn a new move or even evolve. Each Pokemon that evolves by level up has a set level in which they are able to do so. Some Pokemon level up via special items such as evolution stones, and a select few can only evolve by being traded. Evolution is not a merely visual change, as Pokemon of higher evolutionary stages have different stats, can learn different moves, and sometimes change types. Evolution is a wonderful motivator to level up your Pokemon. It was thrilling to see what a Pokemon would grow into on my first playthrough of the game. With almost no internet access, everything was a mystery, and it was a genuine treat to figure it out for myself. It's a shame that kids nowadays will never have the opportunity to make such discoveries. There was a downside to this though, and that was definitely trying to figure out how to get trade-only Pokemon. There are trades that can be done in-game between NPCs, but none of them actually display this type of evolution. So most kids probably had no idea about it. There is a small hint about it in the game, but this is really easy to miss. It just seems kinda obvious to show at least one of these evolutions in one of the in-game trades, but they just don't for some reason. But they did, but they took it out. Evolutions are one of the best aspects of the series. It is so satisfying to literally see your team evolve as you progress through the game. Evolutions also aid in filling in your Pokédex.
Gotta catch 'em all. But you probably won't.
Gotta catch 'em all was the original catchphrase for the franchise. While not used that much nowadays, as the prospect of catching them all now is far more of a daunting task, but the Pokemon count is approaching 1,000, but back during Pokemon Red and Blue's release, catching 150 or more seemed very doable. And completing the Pokédex was one of the goals that the game sets for you. But how easy is it to catch them all? Well, if you only have one version and no friends, then it is impossible, as there are version exclusive Pokemon. Red has the Ekans line, the Oddish line, the Mankey and Growlithe line, as well as Scyther and Electabuzz. For Blue, it has the Sandshrew line, the Vulpix line, the Bellsprout and Meowth line, along with Magmar and Pinsir. This was used to encourage trading between players and definitely not to sell more copies.
Money!
No, but I do actually get the idea behind it, and it works for the Game Boy era of games. But as for the more modern releases where you have access to online trading, I find it to be a much more cynical business decision. It's redundant. We don't need 2 versions anymore. Stop it.
Stop it. Get some
Money!
Catching them all is very much integral to this entry, as Professor Oak encourages you from the very beginning of the game to fill in as much of the Pokédex as possible. There are even some of his aids located around Kanto that will reward you when you capture enough unique species of Pokemon. To properly fill in a Pokédex entry, it's not enough just to encounter a Pokemon, you must also capture it. Even if you have both versions of Red and Blue, it is still not possible to get all Pokemon within one playthrough, as you'll need to restart a couple of times to trade over the starters, and you will need to perform the trade before they evolve. Also, there are a few playthroughs needed in order to get all of the evolutions, and then there is of course the fossils and the fighting dojo Pokemon. Basically what I'm saying is even if you have both versions, it is still kind of a pain in the ass to catch them all. As stupid as the online trades can be at times, with some random wanting like a Mewtwo in exchange for their Weedle, it does make getting the Pokemon you want and need a lot more streamlined. You can catch any Pokemon you come across in the wild on your travels, whether you happen to stumble upon it in tall grass or reel it in when fishing. You should keep in mind that it is against the rules to steal a Pokemon from another trainer. Any Pokemon owned by another trainer will deflect any Pokeballs thrown at them. There is an old man in Viridian City that will teach you how to catch Pokemon, but he doesn't go into much detail. There are 5 different Pokeballs that you can use to catch Pokemon. These are the standard Pokeballs, Great Balls, Ultra Balls, Safari Balls, and the Master Ball. The Master Ball is of course the best with a guaranteed catch. Some people think that there is a chance for it to fail, but this is not true. As soon as you throw, it is 100% that you will catch the Pokemon. There is only one in the game though. You'd think that Ultra Balls would be the next best given how expensive they are. However, because of Gen 1's iffy programming, the Great Ball is actually better in most cases, and even in some cases the Ultra Ball actually ends up being worse than Pokeballs. The only time you should be splurging on Ultra Balls is when going after legendaries and Pokemon with really low catch rates. Each Pokemon has their own catch rate associated with them. Your chances to catch them can be increased not only by the ball that you use, but also by their health and status effects. Lowering their health below half is usually enough. You don't need to drag it too low, as anything less than a third of a Pokemon's health doesn't affect the catch rate. But by far the most effective method is putting a Pokemon to sleep. Have a Pokemon in your party that knows Spore or any other move that puts Pokemon to sleep and just chuck balls. Like in other entries in the series, there is a wobble mechanic. This is when the Pokeball will wobble, giving you some indication of how close you were at achieving a successful capture. But the way this is portrayed in this particular entry is kind of confusing. Instead of having an animation where the Pokemon breaks out of the ball straight away, the game will tell you that you have missed. This can be easily misinterpreted as not being able to catch a Pokemon at all, especially when it occurs when trying to catch a legendary, as this can happen multiple times in a row. When I was a kid, I literally thought I was doing something wrong, like I had to use the special type of Pokeball or something. Thankfully, this animation was changed in subsequent games. Most towns and cities you visit will have a Pokemon Center. At the center, you can talk to a nurse at the front desk and she will fully heal your Pokemon for free. This process not only brings your whole party back to full health, but will also remove any status ailments and restore PP. A PC can also be accessed in the center. The PC is used to store items and Pokemon that you don't have room to carry on your person. However, this incarnation of the Pokemon storage is annoying as fuck. You see, each box can only hold a max of 20 Pokemon, which is fine as you have plenty of boxes at your disposal. The issue is when one of these boxes becomes full and you don't realize it. You have to manually switch between boxes, and if you don't do this and go to catch a Pokemon, the game won't let you. This is such a pain in the ass, especially when trying to catch a rare Pokemon. In fact, the item storage is just as bad. You'll find yourself constantly running out of space in your bag and in the PC storage, meaning you either have to use items when you don't really want or need to, leaving items you find behind, selling them, or simply throwing them away. Your inventory is just all over the place. There's no categorization system, so everything is just thrown in together, including key items. There's no automatic sorting, so you have to manually move stuff around. It is honestly a bit of a nightmare trying to find shit. You can buy and sell items at the Pokemart. Pokemarts are basically just shops where you can buy healing items like potions and antidotes, as well as Pokeballs. In bigger stores you can also buy TMs, stat boosting items and evolutionary stones. You earn money to use at these stores by battling other trainers, and you'll usually have enough for whatever you need, unless you suck and end up losing a lot, as every time you lose to a trainer you lose half of your money. They beat you down in the alley and take half your stuff. Back in the Pokemon Center, you can access the multiplayer elements. You can battle another player or trade with them. And by other player, I mean myself. Absolutely. There are a few trades that can be made between NPCs that you come across while venturing. They will request a specific Pokemon in exchange for theirs. They all have nicknames and cannot be changed. The only possible way to obtain a Farfetch is through a trade, and it will always be named Ducks. Trade Pokemon gain more experience than those that you have caught yourself, but you have to be careful in the early game not to overlevel them, as they will stop obeying you if their level is too high. It's a failsafe to prevent players from just trading over high level Pokemon and just steamrolling everyone. The more badges you have, the higher the level your traded Pokemon can be, all the way up to the point where they can be any level and they will always obey you. Trading did require a link cable and another player with their own Gameboy and game, so there was quite a big barrier for entry. When I was at school at the peak of the Pokemon craze, a lot of kids had the game, but no one had a link cable, so not much trading was going on. The Safari Zone is a special Pokemon preserve in Kanto that trainers can enter to capture Pokemon. It costs 500 Pokédollars, or whatever the currency is called, to enter the zone. Upon entering, you will receive 30 Safari Balls. Catching Pokemon in the Safari Zone is a bit different than in the rest of the game, and by different I mean more annoying. Instead of having your Pokemon with you to help you catch other Pokemon, you instead are given bait and rocks to use. Throwing bait will lower the chances of catching the Pokemon, but will make them less likely to run away. Throwing a rock at the Pokemon will increase the catch rate, but the Pokemon is more likely to flee. Using the bait or rocks is never worth it. Just throw Safari Balls at the Pokemon and just hope you get lucky. While in the Safari Zone, you can only take a limited amount of steps before your session will end. You can rotate your character around on the spot though, and it won't count as taking steps. This way you can get in a lot more encounters without having to leave and re-enter the Safari Zone. This is useful when trying to catch the really rare Pokemon like Kangaskhan and Tauros. The Safari Zone is a fun little gimmick when just catching the more common Pokemon, but when it comes to catching the rarer species with a low catch rate, it is kind of a pain in the ass, to be honest. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. Trying to catch and collect as many Pokemon as possible was always my favourite aspect of the series, and still is. Given the smaller roster, it does make it easy to catch them all. However, due to this entry's strange quirks, it's not as fun to do so as I remember, as there are a lot of little annoyances that start to add up. And what do you get for catching all 150? Or more? Mew does not get— ow! You receive an in-game diploma from Game Freak. Still worth more than a lot of diplomas out there.
I want to be the very best, like no one ever was.
Even if you aren't interested in completing your Pokédex, you will still want to catch and train up a team in order to conquer this game's story mode. And I use the term story mode very loosely, as this game doesn't have that much of a plot. There are events that unfold during your journey, but there isn't really much of a narrative through line, aside from your relationship with your rival. The initial focus in the game will be travelling around Kanto and obtaining gym badges. Gyms are a place to test the skills you've picked up on your journey through the overworld, with a gym leader to face at the end. Some have small puzzles for you to complete in order to reach the leader, but most are just straightforward rooms where you must battle through other trainers. The trainers and gym leaders are usually a lot tougher than anything else you can face during sections of the game, but they do only focus on using one type of Pokemon. Being it rock, fire or water, knowing the gym's type before entering makes countering their teams pretty easy. Furthermore, you can battle a few trainers in the gym and just leave to heal up whenever you want. I think gyms should pose more of a challenge by not letting you leave in between battles. What should be a skill check that challenges the player on most occasions just ends up being a piece of cake. There are 8 gyms that hand out gym badges for winning, but there is one extra gym which is actually a fighting dojo. If you beat it, you can pick between a Hitmonlee or a Hitmonchan, though this is optional. At the start of the game, there is a set order that you need to complete gyms in order to progress, but as you make it to the mid-game, this opens up and there is no set order for beating them, except for the 8th gym. When visiting Viridian City, you will find that the gym there is closed as the leader has left. This actually ties up with the game's antagonists, I guess you could call them, Team Rocket. Team Rocket is the game's villain group, which has become a staple of the series. They aren't really antagonistic to the player in a direct way, but more in the way of acting as roadblocks during certain points. We don't intentionally hunt them down to stop them, it's just that they happen to be around where we need to go. Team Rocket is the ones running the gambling and Rocket game corner, and given how annoying that minigame is, that's pretty evil. One of the many grunts in Mount Moon reveals that Team Rocket plans to profit from the Pokemon fossils they are extracting from the cave by selling them. In Cerulean City, a few of them broke into a house and stole a TM from its owner, and in Lavender Town, a mission to steal Cubone skulls ended with Mr. Fugly being held hostage and a Marowak being killed. The group then overran Silphco in Saffron City in an attempt to steal the Master Ball's blueprints, leading to another hostage scenario. Throughout our adventure, we are tasked with ousting the organizations from its strongholds, and doing so we meet the Team Rocket boss, Giovanni.
Boss will awake after a good night's sleep, walk outside and peel off his robe for a morning dip.
He is wearing swimming trunks, right?
It turns out that he is also the 8th and final gym leader in Viridian City. Viridian City is one of the earliest towns you travel to, but the gym is closed until near the end of the game. It's a nice little twist to close off the Team Rocket storyline. After defeating him, Giovanni acknowledges you as the better trainer because of friendship and shit. He then leaves, vowing to disband Team Rocket. Overall, Team Rocket comes across as more of a gang of criminals than any sort of team directed at a specific goal. Although they are a bit more menacing than other villainous teams in the franchise, given that they do take hostages and end up actually killing their Pokemon, which always upset me as a kid. It's kind of like when a dog dies in a movie. When you have collected all 8 gym badges, you can take on the Elite Four. The Elite Four are considered the 4 strongest trainers in the region. There is Lorelei, who specialises in water and ice types, Bruno, who specialises in rock and fighting types, Agatha, who specialises in poison and ghost types, and then there is Lance, who specialises in dragon types. Well, sort of, since the Dratini line is the only dragon type in Gen 1, so almost half of his team aren't actually dragon type. It's false advertising. The Elite Four does work a bit different to gyms, as you must face them in a row, without the option to return to a Pokemon Center to heal. You can, however, bring restorative items with you and use them during and in between battles. They still have the weakness of focusing on specific types for their teams, so as long as you have at least one decent counter to their type, you shouldn't have too much trouble with them. It's also kind of weird that none of the Elite Four members actually have a full team of 6 Pokemon. They all only use 5. You'd think, this being the ultimate test of your battle skills, that they would at least have full teams. Upon defeating Lance, you come to find out your rival has beaten you to the punch, and has become the Pokemon champion. From the very beginning, Blue acts like a true rival. Tough, wanting to be the best, and willing to steamroll over you. He actually intends to win, even going to the extent of asking his sister not to give you a map so you get lost. Blue appears both when you don't expect and don't want him to appear. He's a real jerk and makes you really want to kick his ass. He starts off only being concerned about the strength of his Pokemon, but as the game progresses, he starts to really care about them. He even has 3 different sprites to show how he has changed throughout his journey. He eventually achieves his goal and becomes the Pokemon champion. Before you. Yeah, it's easy to see this twist coming from a mile away now, but as a kid it made me even more determined to beat this guy. Pokemon isn't known for having an amazing story, but this scenario with our rival is the best execution of having the main character's motivations line up with the player's motives. Unlike the members of the Elite Four, his team is diverse, so you can't just rely on one Pokemon to steamroll his entire team. After defeating our rival, we will be entered into the Hall of Fame. There isn't too much of a post-game, aside from entering Cerulean Cave where you can catch Mewtwo. This game is more about exploring the world at your own pace, and I actually like the minimal story. It provides long stretches of uninterrupted gameplay, which is fantastic because the game's mechanics, as rough as they are around the edges, are by far the best part of it. Occasionally your rival or Team Rocket may stop you, but their appearances are fleeting and the game will quickly return you to the action.
Bye bye, Butterfree.
It's difficult for me to separate myself from the time in which I first played this game. Because it was at the height of the Pokemon craze, everyone in school was playing it and everyone was talking about it. There are rumours circulating around the playground about Pokegods and Mew being hidden under the truck, which in retrospect, now that we have access to the internet, seems incredibly silly. But in the late 90s, all these wild hypotheses seemed plausible because no one really knew anything. Replaying this now, it has definitely lost a lot of its mystique, and much of the game's iffy programming comes across as very antiquated. It puts you in the mindset of, is this a bug or is it working as intended? Many of the core aspects of the series are here, it's just very unrefined, to put it as kindly as possible. I think if you want to experience the journey through Kanto, you're probably better off playing through the Gen 3 remakes, Fire Red and Leaf Green, as they are very similar games, just with the more annoying bits removed. Pokemon Red and Blue may be held together with bubblegum and paper clips, and don't hold up as well as I remember. However, there is still a lot of intrigue in exploring the games that kicked off one of the most successful franchises ever. Bye!